A voice in my head said, I hear voices in my head. Right. What is up? I am Brandon. This is Pro Wrestling Planet. We are going to rank all 40 WrestleManias. Today we're going to rank all 40 WrestleManias, brother. You're going to want to stick around, dude. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, brother, and give that like button a smack. And yes, indeed, today I'm going to try my hand at ranking all 40 WrestleManias. You know, since there's been 40 WrestleManias, I think it's a nice time to sit back and rank them. So since we're working with a nice round number like 40, I kind of broke these up into 4 different top 10s, basically. These first 10 are pretty grim. They're the worst of the worst, the pukiest of the pukiest, the lamest of the lame, the stupidest of the stupidest, the most unwatchable of the unwatchable, the most, well, you know, you get it. So here we go. Number 40, gotta be WrestleMania 36. It's pretty easy. This was the pandemic WrestleMania. There were no fans there. Everything in it was pretty lame besides the cinematic matches, you know, like the Undertaker Boneyard match might be something that you may go back and watch if you're a big Undertaker fan or something like that. But from a rewatch standpoint and from a live watching standpoint, I don't think anyone can disagree that this is without a doubt just the worst WrestleMania that there is. At number 39, I went with WrestleMania 34. And really, if you want to know, even for the most relative insider, if you want a snapshot of the things that would go wrong the late Vince McMahon era, WrestleMania 34 would be it. This was the show's return to New Orleans just 4 years after having WrestleMania 30 there. The show was headlined by a Roman Reigns Brock Lesnar match, which at the time was very, very stale. Believe it or not, it wasn't even close to the end of their feud. They would still wrestle many more times, including at WrestleMania, but that's besides the point. The show was also hampered by some weird booking decisions, like having Charlotte go over Asuka and AJ Styles go over Shinsuke Nakamura in huge title matches for both competitors after enormous amounts of build-up for each of those matches. And my concluding argument for why this one is so bad, well, Braun Strowman won the tag team titles with Nicholas, the 10-year-old child. Number 38, WrestleMania 33. Rewind to a year before that, and this show was obviously just a little bit worse than that, if you can imagine that. This show was headlined by the passing of the torch match with Roman Reigns and The Undertaker, which in the end was not the send-off that really anybody hoped for, or that anyone wanted for that matter. The show was also infamous for the Randy Orton, Bray Wyatt Transform the Ring saga, a relatively uninspired Seth Rollins victory over Triple H, and who could forget the infamous proposal in the middle of the ring between John Cena and Nikki Bella. The show wasn't all bad, however. There was a decent AJ Styles Shane McMahon match, and what was one of the better executed storylines in WWE at that point in time, Kevin Owens versus Chris Jericho, was actually a really good match on this card as well. Right after that, we saw the return of the Hardy Boys, but the show pretty much went downhill from there. Number 37, WrestleMania 32. All in all, this might be kind of a hot take, but this cluster of years here from 32 all the way to 36, with the exception of WrestleMania 35, I'm sorry, but it's just some of the worst stuff that's ever been done. They were very, very long WrestleManias, and once again, you know, senile Vince booking, kind of a common theme through all of these years. So that's kind of why all these WrestleManias, for me, are clustered in this bottom 10 worst of the worst category. But we continue on here with WrestleMania 32, which was more of the same, you know, headlined with Roman Reigns at Triple H. And I'm sorry, even though myself and I'm sure a lot of other fans eventually warmed up to Roman Reigns during the Tribal Chief days, we can't forget about these dark ages though, where we were basically spoon-fed a big victory by him WrestleMania after after WrestleMania after WrestleMania, but it doesn't end there with WrestleMania 32. Oh, no, no, no. Also on that card, we had what I believe to be two of the most weirdest, oddest booking decisions that Vince made during this period. Number one was putting Undertaker together with Shane McMahon and a Hell in a Cell match. Basically, I mean, the match turned out okay, obviously, right? Because it basically all built to Shane McMahon taking a big bump from the cage, which we kind of all knew was going to happen, but it was still a very, very weird thing. You know, this was all part of that odd lockbox storyline as well that never got resolved ever. And the other questionable decision that I was referring to would be the Brock Lesnar versus Dean Ambrose match, which on all accounts was a miserable experience for everyone involved, including Ambrose, Lesnar, and most importantly, the fans themselves. Number 36, WrestleMania 27. You know, if I would have made this list 10 years ago, this one would have been the worst. It occupied the worst spot for a long time. But with time and perspective to think about it, it inches up on the list. But WrestleMania 27, of course, aka Mizomania, just doesn't do it for me. I don't think it really did it for anyone. Although this show did have a pretty sweet match between Triple H and The Undertaker, but it'll still forever be known as Mizomania. Number 35, WrestleMania 9. This is a tough one for me, you know, although I do have very fond memories of WrestleMania 9 as a child. Going back and watching it, really just tough to watch altogether. While there was a couple of like interesting WrestleMania moments in there, like Undertaker coming back from the chloroform, and also the two doinks was kind of a cool visual, you know, that they've replayed over the years several times. There was really not one match on there that you would consider something really worth re-watching at all. And to top it all off, we get the weird ending with Yokozuna beating Bret Hart and then Hulk Hogan coming to save the day for the 958th time. Brother. WrestleMania 9, though, does get style points as being possibly the coolest WrestleMania arena that there was and ever will be. Number 34, WrestleMania 11. 11 for me is just another one of those shows that's just really meh. I guess it's okay to go back and possibly watch, like, but come on, Lawrence Taylor, Bam Bam Bigelow in the main event. I don't know. When the celebs are in the main event, it's usually not a really good sign as far as watchability goes. But it still makes for some great WrestleMania moments, and a lot of the time, that's all Vince McMahon was really looking for, right? So there you go. Number 33, WrestleMania 16. WrestleMania 16, aka WrestleMania 2000, is really quite astounding. I mean, this is a show that should be studied by wrestling historians for years and years to come, because it's really amazing how over all of the talent on that said company's roster could be, but then still at the same time turn in such a forgettable and weird WrestleMania. Don't get me wrong, obviously there was a couple of really good matches here when I look back on it. Of course, the first thing people are going to talk about is the triple threat ladder match, Edge and Christian, Hardy's, Dudley Boys, basically the precursor to what would become the TLC matches. Yes, absolutely, that match was fantastic, definitely worth going back and watching this WrestleMania. The biggest thing that holds WrestleMania 2000 back was the end. You have a Fatal 4 match between Triple H as the champion, defending against The Rock, Big Show, and Mick Foley, which would have been fine. Maybe it was the fact that there was a McMahon interjected in every corner of the match. You could also say that the match and the whole event suffered from the fact that Triple H went over in this match, basically being the first time ever that the bad guy actually won in the main event of WrestleMania. Some may argue that that's not a big deal, and I think that that's fair, but you can't argue that it didn't drag the mood down at all. You know what I mean? Number 32, WrestleMania 1. Yeah, I know some folks are probably going to hate me over this one, but hear me out, all right? Yes, it was the first. Yes, it was legendary. Yes, there are some nice little snippets of moments that you can go back and replay throughout the years. Let me ask you a question. You ever try to sit there and watch this show at 9 o'clock on a weekday evening after you've worked all day? I guarantee you won't make it past past the first 15 minutes, all right, pal? Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love it because of its historical significance, obviously, but it definitely belongs on the bottom 10 as far as something that you're going to rewatch. Number 31, WrestleMania 13. Mania 13 at 31, WrestleMania 13. All this numerology, isn't it going crazy, brother? It's going crazy. Of course, Mania 13, once again. You know, it's not like there's been a WrestleMania where there's never been a memorable moment, all right? Don't get me wrong. Obviously, WrestleMania 13, there was a great I Quit match between Stone Cold and Bret Hart. I get that. But you move past that, though, this show is direly unwatchable. It was also kind of neat to see Undertaker win the championship in the main event of WrestleMania because that was the only time in history where he kind of had that moment. But still, it's against Psycho Sid. The match has got to be, honestly, probably the worst WrestleMania main event that there ever was. Number 30, WrestleMania 4. And the tournament, kind of lame, but it was cool that Randy Savage won. Number 29, WrestleMania 2. Once again, awesome that it was from 3 locations. All right, that was really cool. Other than that, though, matches, nothing to really write home about. Really not a good one on the card. If I'm going to go back and watch WrestleMania 2, I'm going to watch the freaking Battle Royal. That's saying something about the match quality on that card. Number 28, WrestleMania 28. I don't know if I just got kind of confused with the numbers or what there, but WrestleMania 28, you know, it's the first Rock and Cena match, which was okay, I guess. You also had the Hell in a Cell Triple H Undertaker rematch from the year before, which was great. Other than that, though, pretty forgettable show. Number 27, WrestleMania 22, headlined by Triple H, John Cena. It was just kind of there as a WrestleMania to further implement the John Cena era, which is kind of a thing, you know, we ran into this years later with Roman Reigns, so it was the same kind of deal then. There was a really nice Rey Mysterio title win in there, though, and overall, it's not like it was a bad show, but as far as significance, I think it falls right here nicely. Number 26, WrestleMania 7. You know, Hulk Hogan, Sergeant Slaughter just doesn't really do it for me. Obviously, didn't really do it for the people in LA at that time either, regardless of what you believe about why they moved the show from the Los Angeles Coliseum to the sports arena. Number 25, WrestleMania 37. Just kind of a strange show because we were just kind of coming out of the pandemic thing and there was like a half crowd there and it was just kind of it was just kind of a really strange show. It still kind of felt like we were in those times still, so it kind of drags it down. Number 24, WrestleMania 26. This was the Undertaker Shawn Michaels rematch from WrestleMania 25, where Undertaker ended up retiring Shawn Michaels. Was just kind of a strange bummer way to end the show. And looking back on it, this whole show was built around that match. Number 23, WrestleMania 38. This was thankfully the last time we had to sit through Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns headlining a WrestleMania. Of course, it's really kind of harder to quantify these later year WrestleManias due to the change of them being one night to two. But for the most part, besides WrestleMania 36, you know, the 2-night WrestleManias have been okay. But I'm just basically grading them on a whole here, not night 1 to night 2 sort of thing, just in case you're wondering. So yeah, Mania 38 was another one of those 2-night cards, obviously. The other big highlight here, obviously, being the return of Stone Cold for one last match against Kevin Owens, and then on the second night delivering one last Stone Cold stunner to Mr. McMahon, even though it was probably the worst one McMahon had ever taken. Number 22, WrestleMania 29. You know, this is tough for me because I actually went to this WrestleMania. It's very near and dear to my heart. My wife and I, or my wife to be at that time, I whisked her away to this experience over in New York City. I could rewatch this WrestleMania all day long because to me, personally, I think it's the best WrestleMania, if not one of the best WrestleManias. I could rewatch it all day long. But in my unbiased opinion for this list, I ranked it all the way down here. So number 21 is WrestleMania 23, headlined by Cena, Shawn Michaels. Honestly, I think it was overshadowed by the Undertaker Batista match. I thought was way better. All in all, I think it's ranked a little bit higher here just due to the era it was in comparison to the WrestleManias around it, basically. Does that make sense? Number 20 is WrestleMania 24. Legendary WrestleMania for the fact that it's Ric Flair's WWE retirement match. And even though, yes, he unretired in other places or whatever, it was truly one of the best send-offs you could ever give a performer ever in the history of the business. And also, I would argue here, that it was just kind of a neat WrestleMania. It had a neat look. You had the celebrity involvement with Floyd Mayweather versus The Big Show, which was just a huge news story at the time. So I don't know. I just thought that this Mania as a whole deserved to be in the top 20 picture. Number 19, WrestleMania 5. The Mega Powers explode. I mean, what else can you say besides that? Obviously legendary. Hogan versus Savage. The rest of the card, it's really inevitable. It's part of what made WrestleMania. And personally, it's a big part of why I became a wrestling fan. And some of the first things that I remember about wrestling was this feud. Number 18, WrestleMania 6. Kind of flip a coin between these two manias, 5 and 6 here. All kind of a matter of preference, and it all kind of matters, or whether or not you were a Hogan person, or you were a Warrior person, or you were a Savage person, whatever you were into during that time. There's many different ways you can go. I ranked 6 higher than any of them here because I feel like the Warrior and the Hogan passing the torch and it being good guy versus good guy and just all those factors, I think just kind of notches it up just a little bit further than 5 in my opinion. Number 17, WrestleMania 15. WrestleMania 15, without a doubt, was the WWE at its most hottest point during the Attitude Era. Just so much stuff, so many storylines, and this was supposed to be the culmination of all those things. And, well, I can tell you this, the show was exciting to watch live, but looking back on it, you can definitely tell how Russo-rific it all was. And I don't know, it just kind of ages strangely for me, but that being said, it's a classic WrestleMania, and it's going to be on a lot of people's lists of being up there, so I think it sits nicely right here. Number 16, WrestleMania 31. Once again, another show that's very near and dear to my heart, as I actually to this show live in person as well. And there's 2 big reasons why people will remember this show and rank it highly, I think. Number 1 is the fact that it's the only WrestleMania that Sting ever wrestled at or participated in. And even though the match that he had with Triple H was super convoluted and really made no sense at all when you watch it back, it was still just amazing to see Sting at a WrestleMania. And number 2, obviously the most important reason would be the heist, the cash-in heard around the world. Seth Rollins cashing in the briefcase during the Brock Lesnar-Roman Reigns championship match, making it a triple threat match and the ensuing title win. I can tell you this from being there, the crowd was absolutely electric and it was just a phenomenal way to leave WrestleMania. Everyone was very, very happy. Number 15, WrestleMania 12. Once again, if this was my personal list, WrestleMania 12 would be in my top 5, if not number 1. The Iron Man match with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, pivotal point of my childhood. pretty much one of the happiest moments I can remember as a child when Shawn Michaels won the championship. I just thought it was such a thrilling match and conclusion. There was also a few other very memorable things about this WrestleMania. You have the Hollywood Backlot Brawl, had a pretty good Undertaker versus Diesel match as well. Number 14 at WrestleMania 35. So I mentioned earlier the dark ages of the Vince McMahon WrestleMania era. This is the show that I excluded from all that, and here's why, okay? I'm just going to kind of list it out here. Even though this show was a super long show, it had some really cool stuff, some really significant and good matches. We could start at the top with the main event, which was the first ever women's main event at a WrestleMania, which also makes it socially significant as well. Becky Lynch beating Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair. Funny how they never had a rematch, huh? You know, there's some neat little things in here. There's Roman Reigns, Drew McIntyre, Finn Balor, Bobby Lashley, even though that's kind of on the short side. And who could forget Kofi Mania? You got AJ Orton, Rollins, Lesnar. Even though it was a really long show, a lot of pretty good stuff on there. I recommend going back and checking it out. If this would have taken place back in the two-night WrestleMania era, holy smokes, we would be talking about this one even higher up on the list. Number 13, WrestleMania 20. It's kind of hard to talk about this one because you know who wins the championship at the end of it. There's some other stuff on there as well that makes it a decent watch. But yeah, this one would be a lot higher if the circumstances aren't what they are. Number 12, WrestleMania 8. You know, I don't know how 8 got so high on this list. I tell you what, I just think for the time it was probably the best WrestleMania overall in that early 90s time period. Ric Flair, Randy Savage for the championship doesn't mess around at all. I don't know, to me it's just a fun watch. If I'm going for something from that time period, I'm usually jumping right to WrestleMania 8. Number 11, WrestleMania 39. Recency bias, of course, but for all intents and purposes, this was the first Triple H booked WrestleMania that there was, and I think deserves to be so high on this list just for that fact that it was such a welcome breath of fresh air to everyone. Number 10, WrestleMania 19. This is basically a crowd pleaser right here. Honestly, I don't know what people love about WrestleMania 19 per se. It being held in Seattle in a baseball stadium gave it a really cool aesthetic, and there were some decent matches on there, don't get me wrong. Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle, Rock and Stone Cold for the final time. I mean, I get it, but overall, I've thought this WrestleMania is just kind of meh. Number 9, WrestleMania 3. You know, what can you say about WrestleMania 3 that hasn't already been said? It deserves to be in this spot basically just for its historical significance. The first ever stadium show in WrestleMania lore. Hogan Andre, even though it wasn't the first time technically for any of that, was promoted to just the utmost degree to make it into the huge spectacle that it was. And I don't know if WrestleMania gets all the way to 40 years without WrestleMania 3. Number 8, WrestleMania 10. I think this show had absolutely amazing stuff on it, opening up with Bret Hart, Owen Hart, which is arguably top 10 WrestleMania matches of all time. So you also have some other memorable stuff in here like Randy Savage and Crush. Also, I mean, come on, the ladder match between Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels and the legend that all of that has become, and then some. The company righted all the wrongs from WrestleMania 9 the year before. Bret Hart gets the job done and gets the Heroes celebration. Number 7, WrestleMania 14. This was the WrestleMania that really kicked the Attitude Era into high gear. That's why it's placed here on the countdown. The title win that launched Stone Cold Steve Austin into superstardom. I don't think you can have any argument against that. There was also some pretty other memorable stuff here as well, like the first ever Undertaker Kane match. Honestly, this is my favorite WrestleMania of the Attitude Era because it kicked it off in such an amazing way. Number 6, WrestleMania 20. 2021. Personally, not a big fan of this WrestleMania, but it is very, very significant because, of course, two major superstars were made on the same night, with John Cena and Batista winning both the Raw and SmackDown championships. On top of that, you also have the amazing Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle match. You gotta say, obviously, top 10 WrestleMania matches of all time right there and of itself. So there you go. Number 5, WrestleMania 30. This is gonna be a weird one, and it's gonna divide a whole lot of people. I am going to argue that because the streak ended on this show, it's very culturally significant, even though it still makes a lot of people triggered and upset to this day. But I think it makes this WrestleMania more than significant and more than rewatchable. And beyond that, the main event and obviously the whole storyline surrounding it, the Yes Movement with Daniel Bryan, one of the most organic things to happen in WWE over the course of the last 15 years. Number 4, WrestleMania 18. Come on, I mean, Rock Hogan, who can argue with that? You also had Triple H Jericho, which was all right in of itself for the title match. They, of course, would always argue that, they knew that they shouldn't have headlined the show over Rock Hogan, but be that as it may, I don't think it could take away from the fact that this was a very well put together WrestleMania as a whole. Also, a very awesome, forgotten sleeper match of this card that a lot of people don't remember or talk about is the very first Undertaker versus Ric Flair encounter. Number 3, WrestleMania 25. The show as a whole, probably not the best, but the fact of the matter is that this WrestleMania contains the single best WrestleMania match, in my opinion. The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels wasn't even the main event. It completely outshined everything else on the card. For that fact alone, it deserves to be top 5, if not even higher, on my list, your list, Johnny Joe down the street's list, anybody's list, Jericho's list, the prayer list, the grocery shopping list. The lists go on and on and on. Don't you see? They never stop. Number 2, WrestleMania 40. Man, this is bold when I came up with this list here, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to go out on the limb here, recency bias or not, what WWE, Triple H, and everyone put together in 2024 leading up, whether it was an accident, whether it was happenstance, it doesn't really matter. The storyline, everyone waiting for Cody Rhodes to get his match, The Rock trying to interject himself into it, whether or not what you believe was real or what was part of the story, it's really doesn't even matter, because at the end of the day, it got everyone intrigued. Record-setting, groundbreaking. I mean, the list goes on. You have a 2-night WrestleMania. There's a lot of other great matches involved in the whole thing itself. I don't know. It's hard to top. With all that being said, it still cannot beat the undisputed champion of WrestleManias, number 1, WrestleMania 17. WrestleMania 17 is the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. I don't know how anyone could argue ever against this. As great as WrestleMania 40 was from a business standpoint and from a storyline aspect, you simply cannot mess around with what WrestleMania 17 had to offer, okay? Capped off by what was, without a doubt, the best Rock and Stone Cold match that they had at WrestleMania. And even though it was kind of tarnished a little bit, you want to say, by Stone Cold turning heel at the end, does not matter. The show as a whole could have done regardless of the twist at the end, okay? And it doesn't just begin and end with that match. This show quite literally just featured banger after banger. Probably the second best and or most important match on the show was the tag team title match, the tables, ladders, and chairs rematch from SummerSlam the year before, and honestly, even the WrestleMania the year before. We all asked ourselves if these guys could keep topping themselves in these kind of matches, and they definitely were able to do that here. Shane McMahon versus Vince McMahon, which was way better than it had any business of being. Taker, Triple H, also another solid main event thrown in there. And beyond that, this WrestleMania had undercard matches that were way better than they had any business of being. And that just kind of goes and speaks the volume as to a couple of these performers in here, okay? When you've got matches like Eddie Guerrero and Test, best match Test ever worked in his life. You also had Jericho Regal earlier in the show, which was also great undercard match. Not to mention Kurt Angle versus Redacted in a submission match, nice little match as well. So that's it, guys. That's my list. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think down in the comments. I don't expect you guys to list them all out, but I want to know at least what your favorite WrestleMania is down there. Let me know. As Kiss would say, shout it out loud, or write it down. I don't know. They said one of those things. I can't really remember. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I want to thank you very much for joining me. Make sure you're subscribed. Leave a like on your way out. Until next time, we'll see you right here on Pro Wrestling Planet.